Hello, and welcome to this video on the Molten Bypass from Molten Modular and Befaco. It can add the option to bypass modules in your signal path, and we'll also look at creative ways of bypassing, switching and muting. Here's what's to come. This video is sponsored by Molten Modular and Befaco. So Robin over at Molten Modular pondered why your rack effects don't have bypasses. Very few of them have the option to actually turn the effect on and off. You can of course, like on this delay, change the mix level, but it's not the instant on and off of say a guitar pedal where you stomp the thing on or off. And that was the catalyst for the idea here with the Molten Bypass. It takes an input, lets you send and return from an effect, and then you patch out of it and use the launch button to bypass and turn on and off the thing you've patched to and from your effects. So running down the features here, this is a left normaling to right for mono inputs or stereo input module. You could use it for dual mono too. This routes straight to the output, but when you launch this with either gated or latching behaviour that I'll come to, this enables this being sent to your effects on this output. You come back from your effects to from effects, this input, and then they're present at the output. We have a hard and soft switch, and hard is an instant switch when you press that button between routing the input to the output or routing this effect signal to the output, like a simple hard on and off mute or bypass. When we have soft enabled, this lets you use trails, which is a term you'd find in many guitar pedals. If you're sending, say, to long ambient effects, you patch in your synth sounds here, you come out to your effects and back again, but when you enable this, it sends to and from. When you disable, it cuts the send, it no longer sends to the effects, but it keeps the from effects open, mixing in with the input. So reverb trails and delay trails will mix in against that input without continuing to send them new sounds. You have a return level from silence, 0 dB and some gain, which is handy as some effects modules need a little boost to bring their level up. And then we have the gated behaviour that is momentary, either with a high voltage at the input here or while you hold the button. And then we have a latching behaviour that is on and off with a single press, or takes a gate and a trigger to turn it on and off and latch that behaviour. It's a simple module and there's creative ways to use it. The timing index is on the screen now if you'd like to skip around. The first patch will just reinforce these features and show them in context, and then we'll get into some more creative and musical examples. So let's dive in. So let's use this patch to explain the Molten Bypass and use it in its kind of default intended bass state. My input here is my stereo voice from Platts and this module from Cray. The two effects output from the Molten Bypass comes to my Vino echo here, high feedback reversing modulated delays, and then coming out of the delay into the from effects inputs on these purple cables, and then the output of the Molten Bypass is what we're recording. I'm triggering some latching of the launch. Let's remove that for now. And the default state here, when launch is disabled, this is bypassed. The input just routes to the output, with the behaviour set to be hard. When I launch this enables the signal to be sent from the to effects. It also opens up the circuit for the from effects to come back through to the output. And when I turn it back off, it just cuts that off instantly, like a simple bypass switch. If we set this to be gated mode, this is momentary, in that it holds as long as the button is held. Now if we set this to be soft, what this will do is launch the to effects signal to my effects. The return is open, but it leaves the return open for the effects to trail. And trails is a term you see in many guitar pedals. So you're playing your guitar into a delay, you turn off the delay pedal, it cuts off instantly. That will be like the hard mode there. But when you have trails mode on guitar pedals, it lets these ambient effects trail and continue without feeding them any more input sound. So if I have a gated behaviour here, set to soft, as soon as I press this, it will send to the delay, and when I let go, it will stop sending to the delay, but the from effects will keep going, and we'll hear these reverse buffers and the feedback of the delay. And because these effects are trailing quite long with the feedback and reverb, you can hear it takes a while for that to die down. And this might be a more natural way of sending to effects, letting their trails continue and keep going. Now here I'm going to modulate this. This is an 8th note gate stream, and then I have a random 8th note with a low probability of it firing, and I'm going to let this latch the effects on and off. The effects have a volume. We can cut this all the way down to silence. Which makes this quite nice as a mute, or you could even use it as a kind of really aggressive tremolo. And you can also boost the effects beyond 0 dB in that center position. So nice and simple, but some smart ways of working. And there's a few other ways that you can creatively bypass and launch here. So let's get into some more patches. So here I'm using the Molten Bypass like a simple switch. And I had in mind that I wanted a nice kind of riff going here. And I was thinking, do I want to go kind of East Coast, subtractive, filtered, rich waves, or cleaner, simpler waves with more of a kind of West Coast wave-folded twist? And the answer, while switching between them, is why not have both? In the background, there's some simple drums. I'll mute those for now. There's a little bit of sidechain ducking and clipping going on. I remove that in Manic here for now too. And here's the output of the Molten Bypass. If I remove the switching, at the input I have a saw wave coming through a filter, just a pony VCF here. This is the input passing through out to my mixer. Now if I latch this and switch, I'm not actually sending and returning anything here. To effects, these outputs on the module aren't actually going anywhere. This is the sine wave from my oscillator, patched across to a wave folder, Manic, which is modulated and brought back in. So I'm actually just switching between them. As I say, it's not a send and a return. This is simply switching between the input, the filtered saw wave, and the return, which is the wave-folded sine wave. Now this is on latch. Red trace here, purple cable is a gate rhythm. And we get a really interesting kind of chop and change between filtered and folded waves here. Add a bit of sidechain, push into a bit more clipping, and drums back in. A fun little choppy switch between filtered and folded signal chains. Say we're going to look at this like a stereo mute or a stereo on and off, depending on which way we patch it and which way around you look at it. I have some drums in the background. I'll mute those for now. And unmuting my mixer, this is the stereo synth line coming in, and the outs feed a little bit of delay before they go into my mixer to be recorded. Now with this set to latch, nothing to effects, I'm not sending anywhere, and nothing in the from effects, I'm not returning anywhere. Latching behaviour there will just mute when I turn this on, and it will take another press to disable that mute. Setting this to gate, this will be like a momentary mute that mutes as long as I hold the button. Now if you wanted this to work the other way around, more like a kind of on switch than an off switch, or an on rather than a mute, we'll patch our signal into the from effects no input here. So when this is enabled, it's letting the from effects signal come through the output. So it's working the other way around. And if we gate it, it's like a momentary on rather than a momentary off. So beat back in. Here's a steady 8th note gate stream. I'm going to use this to switch. Let's start with it gated. And because this is on the beat, it's muting on the beat, and it's those little off beats that are poking through. Again, if I patch into the from effects, this changes its behaviour where it's turning on this beat when this is enabled and off when it's not. Similarly, if we latch this and use this to latch, we get an offbeat set of 2 notes. Back, off, one, off, on, off, on, off. But again, if I swap this around to come into the from effects, when this is hitting, it's now on the beat. So that's just a steady 8th note clock. You can be more creative in what you're patching in here and use this like a mute or an off switch or an on switch, the other way around, opposite of a mute. Here I'm playing around with some effects throws and gated effects throws, not only using this like a send, that kind of gated sends my snare drum out to a reverb, but actually using it in gate mode and the hard mode there, we're actually creating a gated reverb out of a normal reverb. Now muting the output of the bypass here in my mixer, 808 kick and hats and little shaker samples. I'll mute those for now. Remove this modulation and unmute the snare here in my patch. This is an 808 snare sample coming in mono. I'm sending to the effects in mono. I have the dry wet balanced on the effect and then a stereo reverb coming back into the from effects sockets, and we're coming out in stereo. So as I turn this on, this is sending, enabling the 2 effects to happen, and also enabling and cutting off the from effects. So there's my gated reverb effect. By cutting this off, rather than letting it send all the time. If I go into the soft mode, it leaves the return, the from effects open. Now, using this gate signal here, let's gate these. Now, when and where I place my actual off signal to change this gate stream will determine how gated this snare sounds. It's gating on beat 2 when it comes all the way back round to the next snare hit. If I could gate it right after and just send a little blip. Let's do this against the beat. So it's quite fun to choose on my sequence here where I'm cutting this off. So here's a fun patch that takes a mono input, which is my basic synth line with a saw wave into a resonant filter, quite a modulated filter, and VCA that's coming in mono. I'm sending to 2 different separate mono effects chains, bringing those back as if they're stereo, so there's some different hard left and right panning going on here. And then the stereo out comes into my mixer, where it mixes against this beat. Let's lose the beat for now. And we'll lose this sequenced gating. So this is the input, saw wave into filter and VCA. This is my main envelope here. Let's open this much longer. And then as I turn on the gating here, this is my processing. Hard left, I have an MXR fuzz pedal into a Yamaha chorus pedal. And then on the right, I have an Echo Fix chorus. So this goes from a mono image and just kind of goes cinematic widescreen, if you like. Nice drive and nice modulation. Now adding in the modulation, this is a sequence coming in. Accent inserting steps within the pattern by letting this return sound come back in. Drums back in. And another fun thing here, if I just simply turn this off, it's quite fun even just as a mute. And I did need to boost the level here above 0 dB. I'm using a pedal interface to interface these pedals here. I just needed a bit more level, so that's coming quite handy. So here we're looking at Audiorate muting or kind of Audiorate tremolo effects. Everything is squared off because we're switching here. There's no kind of smooth in between states by modulating the launch or bypass here. Without it, this is my input. For now, a simple triangle wave on the green trace and cables. Blue trace is my modulator, which is going to be an Audiorate oscillator, and the yellow trace is the output. Now remove any sequencing here. And you can see that this in gated mode here is gating in and out portions of this wave. And you could use any waveform, but it's not going to do anything with smoother edges here. The advantage of a pulse is that pulse width then has an effect on how much of the signal is on or off. Going up through higher audio rates. And if this was an LFO, we get a tremolo effect. Let's change the input waveform to a saw. And again, you can see how the incoming pulse width, because this is gated, so the time the pulse is on and off makes a difference. If it was latched, it wouldn't make a difference, but latching isn't working up at audio rates here anyway. And like any audio rate modulation, just fine-tune them into musical intervals. If I pitch sequence the Audiorate latching or launching modulator, maybe a bit easier if I take this down to a triangle again. It's very musically stable, the pitch of the input isn't going anywhere, but the modulation pitch is changing. And then you could take this sound and articulate it through filters, low pass gates, distortion, and process it however you like. So this patch started with me wanting to play with sub-audio, DC signals, triggers, clocks and CV, because this will work and process sending to and from CV signals. It doesn't have to be just for audio. And what I'm left with is a kind of performance mute or kind of preset or scene shift if you like. Changing kick rhythms, changing the filter modulation from my bass, and sending out a signal that creates some effects here in the mix. Let's take a look at the left side first, which is my kick drum. So I'll mute some other sounds here. With just the basic drums playing, the input to the left side, green cable, green trace, is a 4 to the floor kick. This is set to hard and gated here, and I hold the button, it switches from the input to the signal in from effects. But it's not from any effects, it's just a different trigger rhythm. Blue cables, blue trace, red cables is the output. So it's working like a switch to switch up that kick drum rhythm. Now the right side here affects my bass sound. The input is this main envelope that you can hear modulating the filter. The yellow trace there shows the output. And again, I'm using this like a switch to switch from the input to the signal in from effects. Again, it's not effects. In this case, it's an LFO. And one interesting thing, if we enable the soft switching, we actually mix the from effect signal and the input signal. So mixed modulation in this case. But I have one other thing going on here, which is the 2 effects that's taking the input. When this is enabled, it's sending 2 effects. Again, no effects here. Just think of it as a signal being sent somewhere. And this just sends the envelope at the input to a VCA that then sends this sound into some effects. So I'm muting that in the mixer. This is that main envelope, currently modulating the bass sound. But here it is, opening up a sound in my VCA, which feeds my effects. Is anyone else getting Pump Up the Jam vibes for some reason? If you've got this far in the video, go drop a Molten sync down in the comments. You can support me on patreon.com/DivKid. Hit like and subscribe, that all helps out the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!